All right, it's 6 o'clock. Call the meeting to order. First order of business is to pledge allegiance to the flag. If you'll all stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next order of business is the Regional Fire Collaboration Working Group. I'll turn it over to Connor.
For now, that's terrific. Thank you everybody for being here. I'm Connor McIver, I'm the Town Administrator in Barrington. As you know, we started this process in June of last year, or this year, excuse me. And the purpose of this meeting is progress report, right? We heard a directive from the select boards to join this working group. We developed a charge, and we've been hard at work, led by the chiefs with a lot of support from the community members and certainly the select board members. We've met 7 times, and we're here to present a progress report, go over some materials we prepared, and more importantly, get input from the select boards and start to discuss next steps. I think it's important to point out that the reason we're here, the reason we got together in June is because our fire chiefs and the men and women behind them had the courage to speak up and say, we're concerned about the future of the fire service. We have concerns about staffing, we have concerns about safety, we have concerns about providing the level of service that our communities have grown to expect as the fire service evolves, as the needs of pressing in each community evolve. And so that was the impetus for us to get together and start considering what possible solutions there were, how we could work together to consider possible solutions. And I point that out because as somebody not from the fire service and not intimately involved, I think it's easy to assume that that is something that that might not happen in a normal course of events in an industry like the fire service. So we're very fortunate to be led by all the men and women in the 3 fire departments and be willing to put their hand up and say, we need to be thinking about something different. We need to approach this different. So the select board, for their credit, listened to the fire professionals. We got together in June. That was the start of the charge that this working group had. The working group formed. All 3 select boards approved that charge, which is in the materials. And like I said, we've had 7 meetings, and the work of this committee has really been the fire chiefs and their staff. The community members and the select board members have been excellent sounding boards, and we've refined and revised the work that we've done with their input. But I think a lot of credit goes to the chiefs and their staff for where we are today and what we're going to go over. So we're going to do introductions in a moment to the rest of the working group, but a couple of items I wanted to point out. So the process for tonight is going to be going through the strategic plan document. So all of the board members have a printed copy. There's some extras up on the table there if anybody in the audience wants one. It's also available online. This is a document that the working group developed and approved. And so this will kind of be the guide for tonight's progress report. Included in this are short-term and long-term goals. The way the committee has looked at that is the short-term goals are operational. These are things that the chiefs have been working on, and we've made a tremendous amount of progress, and we look forward to reporting on that. The long-term goals are more political action items, things that are going to require an action of the boards to consider further. And so we have a draft of those goals and the objectives as part of those goals, but we want the select boards to weigh in and give direction on those long-term goals and a potential timeline. So the working group charge set out meetings up until this joint meeting. And there was a note that it may continue into 2026, but that's a request of this joint meeting. Based on what you hear, we want you to consider what you think the role of the working group could or should be into the future. So after you hear the presentation and we talk about the progress on short-term goals and looking for feedback on the long-term goals, as we wrap up, we're going to be looking for some direction on where the work goes from here, if anywhere. So other printed materials that you all have at your table, and there are extra copies up at the entrance. A copy of the presentation so you can follow along up here. Again, all of these materials are available online. Copy of the agenda, which kind of walks through the progression for tonight. And then the last document is, and maybe one of the more important ones, is an informational brochure that basically summarizes the charge that was established for this working group and provides some of the preliminary data. And the real audience for this brochure is the average resident in any community, to give them an idea of what is this working group, what is the purpose, why are we doing this, and where do I find more information. And you'll notice on the front of that, each of the three communities' websites are listed, so that members from those communities can go to their own town's web address and find information about the working group, who to contact for more information, and the such. So if there are extras up there on your way out, feel free to take a couple, give them to friends and neighbors, and certainly it's available electronically also. Only other logistical item, this meeting is being recorded. Thank you to the town of Lee for facilitating the meeting and having that recording. So we will have this meeting available online afterwards for anybody who couldn't make it and is interested in this progress report from the working group. So if there aren't any questions, we'll proceed into introductions. That's the agenda. And so if we will, I'd like to start introductions with the community members of the working group. Mr. Sundberg, if you're ready.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name's Don Sundberg. I moved to Madbury in 1978 on Garrison Lane. At that time, it was called The Project by people in town. And a little road of 30 houses were all new from outside of New Hampshire. That was an interesting thing. Just prior to the time we arrived, there was a grass and brush fire between the houses on Pudding Hill Road and Garrison Lane. And it caused a little bit of concern by the neighborhood. It was put out, but the neighbors were unsettled, and that's one of the first conversations we had as a family with the neighbors in town. I think then we fully realized what a all-volunteer fire department meant. The Madbury population at that time was 800. It's now 47 years later. The population is now 1,800. We still have a all-volunteer fire department. But during those 47 years, the townsfolk have always approved fire department's request for new or used trucks and equipment. We built a new safety complex. So in fact, that's all good news. We haven't yet faced the issue of personnel and whether we should have a more professional or full-time staff, especially as it relates to response time. I think that's the key phrase here. Obviously, a move in that direction would cause a budgetary issue for town, and my view is that it's seriously time to consider the future for this town. That's why I volunteered. So I'm happy to hear the conversation tonight and share with my other community members. So thank you, Connor.
Perfect. Mr. Lonano?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is James Lonano. I'm a resident of the town of Lee. First, some thanks. Thank you to the Lee Select Board for their support and to this committee. Thank you to Connor for leading our meetings, and thank you to the chiefs. I think everyone is going to be, I know I am, truly impressed with the amount of work that the chiefs put in to prepare the materials for tonight. And they've really been doing a lot of hard work in addition to what they do every single day for their respective departments. I've learned a lot in a short time, not just about my department in the town of Lee, but about the departments in the other two towns, Madbury and Barrington. There's a lot of things that affect our community right now, and there's a lot of things that will affect our community in the very near future. One of those things that I've learned is leadership. Barrington had their chief retire recently, and they went on a hunt for a new chief that started last year in the fall of 2024. And they were whittled and pulled down to 4, and not one of them was a fit for the town of Barrington. And that's a challenge that Lee is going to face in the very near future as well. It's a unique challenge to find a good candidate for these types of departments, which are a little bit smaller. And there's a distinction I've learned between having an administrative chief or having a working chief. Administrative chief who knows how to prepare budgets, run the ins and outs, day-to-day operations of a department, And some of those candidates are gonna come from larger departments and may not wanna work in a smaller community. So that's a challenge that's facing. Or you have potentially on the other side, a working chief, more experience with those on-scene operations, but lacks administrative know-how and how to run a modern-day 21st century department. So one of the things that we've been looking at is a refined and distinct command structure if there were a combination of the 3 towns into one department to combine the different resources and hopefully attract a better pool of candidates. One of the other issues is we're going to hear in great detail staffing, retention. Lee has full-time members and part-time members. We've moved away from an all-volunteer department, and that's worked out for us. Chief Nemeth has a dedicated officer who does fire prevention duties, going around conducting the inspections. And that's something, again, looking at a combined leadership structure, that's something that all towns will benefit from, to have those inspections done by a dedicated officer so that the administrative chief is free to do that job and not also be conducting, the annual inspections that go hand in hand with all the different businesses and towns. So there's a lot that I've learned. There's a lot to learn in this instance, and I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight.
Mr. Sylvia?
Thank you. My name is Dale Sylvia. I'm a Barrington resident. A little bit of background about myself. I'm a retired fire chief. I had 28 years on the job and also 20 in the Air Force as a firefighter. I retired as the chief out of Newington and the deputy chief out of Pease in the Air National Guard. I've served on the Barrington Budget Committee, and I'm currently the chair of the Rec Department, so I appreciate the problems that you're facing as far as municipal budgets and understanding. I'm here to talk to you briefly tonight about firefighter safety. It's something I'm very passionate about. I could talk about this for hours or even days on end, but I'm going to try to wrap it up in a minute or two. What we all operate under is something called NFPA, National Fire Protection Association. All the towns do, we all do. To simplify it, you could kind of say it's the RSAs of the fire world. These are the laws that we have to follow. And I specifically want to talk to you about 2 standards tonight, 1710 and 1720. 1710 refers to how full-time departments have to operate, which would be what Lee is required to follow. And 1720 is for a combination and volunteer departments, so Madbury and Barrington would fall into 1720. And what 1710 tells us is you have to have 15 firefighters on scene in the first 10 minutes. 1720 says it depends upon the population of that particular area, but it's roughly 9 firefighters in the first 10 minutes. The reality is, we've never met it. We're never going to small towns, we never have. That's just the truth. We've sort of, in a half hour, we could have the world there. You can have 30 firefighters, 40 firefighters, but the first 10, 20 minutes is when it matters. And that's when firefighter safety, that's when someone's gonna get hurt, and that's when they're gonna either save your house or lose your house. Those first 10, 20 minutes are everything. This is not a case now of saying the world is falling, we need more money. That's not what this is about at all. That's not what this is. The reality is, it's just there's no manpower out there. And you can look at the timing, wherever it was, go back to COVID, go back 5 years, the manpower just is not there. It's not a question of throwing money at it anymore. The job's just not there. So the problem that creates is no one town can solve this. And we're all competing against each other. These chiefs, they all work together, but they're all fighting for the same firefighters at the same time. So not only, the reality is, and then they're all gonna lose to the bigger cities. So what we look at is firefighter safety, and it's really kind of interesting. Connor spoke to it a little bit at the beginning, talking about how the fire departments always used to say, we have everything under control, we can save the world. That's not the case anymore. It really isn't. And one of the things we talk about as firefighter safety is the physical aspect. But I'm gonna point out, and this is something we need to talk about more, is the mental strain and the capacity and the things like that it does. It is a firefighter safety issue. It's reality. So what happens is, these firefighters are taking it under themselves to solve the problem, and they're gonna go to bigger cities where it's safe, and that just makes our problem bigger and bigger. And no town, Lee cannot solve this, Barrington can't, Madbury can't. Nobody can solve this on their own. The bigger cities can't even right now. So where does that leave us? It doesn't leave us very many choices at all. It's not even a question of the best choice. There are no choices. So what are our options right now to solve this? In my opinion, and I think I speak for the chiefs so they can talk to themselves in a second here, the reality is we have to learn to share our resources better. That's what this is about. It's not a question of asking for more money, for more firefighters. They're not there. We have to learn to share our resources. And that's the short-term solution. And you're gonna hear from all three chiefs tonight talking about how we share that. That's our short-term goal. They're gonna actually present some stuff to you. The long-term goal, and we are not there yet, may not be sharing resources at all, but it may be combining our resources. That may be the wave of the future. We're definitely not there yet, but there's a lot of questions to be answered. But to get there, we have to learn to start sharing our resources. I'm gonna finish wrapping this up, going back to the firefighter safety aspect. This isn't a question of the sky is falling. It already fell. Firefighters are at an all-time low safety. The safety is at an all-time low right now, which means as residents, our safety is at an all-time low. That is simple reality. And we have to find a way of working together to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll introduce the members, the select board members of the working group, starting with Mr. Burke from Madbury.
All right, good evening. My name is Tim Burt. I'm on the Madbury Select Board. I don't really have too much to say that already hasn't been said, but I do want to thank Connor for facilitating the meetings the group has had and putting all the work behind the scenes, getting our minutes to us, our materials to us, has been a huge help of keeping the logistics of our group going at a pretty rapid pace. I've been really impressed with the pace of work that this group has done, but more than that, I continue to be impressed with the quality of work that the chiefs are doing. Just to echo that this whole concept came to us from the three chiefs, and that is unheard of. So when we have three chiefs coming to us with an idea like this, we really have to pay attention. And Dale's exactly right. This is collaboration. This is sharing that could potentially lead to combination, some version thereof. But the work that was done over these last couple of months, you're going to see. We'll kind of outline it for us of where we are, where we're going in the short term, and what are our options in the long term. From Madbury's perspective, we're in a unique situation. We're the small little town that's just kind of hanging on for dear life, trying to figure out what's what, and we're looking at Barrington and Lee for help. So we're in a unique situation where a group like this has been really informative for us to really help give us an option as to where we can go to improve response times and safety for our firefighters. Thank you.
Mr. Roby?
Hi, yeah. Oh, sorry. Not all members, just members, just that group.
We'll get the select board members after.
Sorry.
Hello, all right, thank you, Connor. The biggest thing for me is I learned an awful lot, and hopefully that will be transmitted to the people at the meeting and also the people that look online. There's a lot of good information that's going to come out of this particular meeting, but the thing I was most impressed by is the three chiefs. There was no egos, they worked collaboratively together, and it was a great experience. The whole committee, there's tons of people there that have lots of knowledge, and they shared it with the rest of us. So I want to thank all of them, but this particular information that's going to be shared, there's a lot of interesting stuff. I thought the most impressive thing was the call response. That is like, ooh, oh my goodness. We got particular issues and problems and stuff like that. So, like Dale said, sky is not falling, but I think we need to be proactive and do something about this particular issue. So.
Thank you. Mr. Scotia?
Yes, example. Well, everybody is so well spoken tonight, leaving me with very little to say, but just to echo the working group, through the weeks, the amount of times we met, the hard work that has gone in, super credit to all those guys, Scott, John, and everybody else, and excited for people to hear the work that went into this, and I think there's some excitement on the horizon. So, thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll have an opportunity to hear from the chiefs a little bit. Unfortunately, Chief Hurley wasn't able to make it tonight. We'll go Scott Nevitt.
I think throughout my career, joined the department in '98 as a volunteer. I came through and was hired in 2004 as the first full-timer. And I took over as chief in 2014. I've seen our department progress. I've seen our department go through the ups and downs. There was a time where we were training all of our on-call members for them to then either get hired with us part-time or full-time, but then they were leaving to go to the bigger departments like Dale talked about. Throughout the last couple of years, I've put a great deal of time into why they're leaving. I've had great support from the board and the town, that we've looked at step programs, we've looked at the bunk room situation here, and everything does add up and it does matter to the firefighters. I think the fire service in general, we never want to say we can't do something. We always have to come up with the right answers. And I think that's why the chiefs work so well together. We do mutual aid every day. And then we don't go to the board or to the residents and say the sky's falling, because it shouldn't for us, because we always have to have an answer. So working with this group, I think everybody brought something to the table. It was really nice because although we work with Barrington and Madbury a lot, there was different aspects of each department that I didn't know about. So we've compiled all this information. Like Connor has talked about, I felt like the short-term goals are things that the chiefs can do at this point that actually helps all the communities, including ours, because we only have 2 people on shift. So if we can have a Barrington engine come over with 2 more people, that's 4 firefighters and 2 apparatus. So we'll talk about it later, but we looked at a response matrix, there's different avenues. And I guess my biggest point is that throughout this whole thing, we want to evaluate everything. The fire chiefs and the group aren't coming to everybody saying, we need to do this. We just want to evaluate it and put it on the table.
Thank you. And unfortunately, Interim Chief Janelle had an emergency come up, and he is, in his place tonight is Assistant Chief Eric Lindsay. And I want to point out that in the absence of the retirement of Rick Walker, although John Janelle was appointed the interim chief, all of the officers, including Eric who's here tonight, Chris who's in the audience, and the others have closely supported the work of the working group and the operations of the fire department. So, Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Eric Lindsay. Again, I've been on the Barrington Fire Department since '94. Pete's got a little bit. Just because I'm older, yeah. Although I do have a little bit more hair than Chief Janelle. I am by no means standing in and trying to accept any credit that he has put into this. Chief Janelle has put a lot of time and effort into this. And yeah, this was, it was a slow realization, but it was a realization. I came to the realization 5 or 6 years ago. We were on the scene of a motor vehicle accident. Everything had been taken care of. We were getting ready to, we were waiting for the tow company to remove the vehicle. And I looked around and I was like, this is the same crew that would have been here in 1997. And you know, the truck had been replaced, and it's like, when do I get to get replaced? but in all seriousness, we're looking back, so we were looking at, there was a gap that, we had replaced people coming up through, and there's been no replacements, nobody's running us out. And again, there's a long history of collaboration back with Chief Hayes and Chief Walcott and Chief Doucette. They always got along very well. And that has continued up through, and that's kind of what started the conversation, is that there is very few ego between the communities and the chiefs. And with Chief Walker retiring, Scotty threatening it, but not really. No, he's not going to pull the trigger, but he's talking about it. And Chief Burley looking at retirement as well. That's when we kind of came to the realization that this was the time to start having this discussion. And although I thought it was going to be a big project, I had no idea the scope that Connor was going to have us bite off. So I'll stop wasting everybody's time.
Terrific. I think for the benefit of knowing who's around the table, if we could go around and introduce the balance of the select board members from each community, starting with Mr. Avery in Madbury.
Mark Avery, Madbury, nothing other to say than here to listen.
Susan Ossoff from Madbury.
Rebecca Hawthorne, Lee.
John LaCourse, Lee.
Dan Manchek, Barrington. I would point out that we talk about fire and rescue. Today is the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And
Yes.
I would hope, actually, this does have more relation here because when the Fitzgerald went down, they started reevaluating the safety of the ships on the Great Lakes. And today they're very, very safe. Hopefully we won't have to force our firefighters and EMTs to have some major disaster like that to occur. So I look forward to this. I think we mentioned this 5 or 6 years ago, and everyone thought, oh, pretty weird stuff. And then I think the chiefs have put it together very nicely and brought it to reality other than just wow, that's an interesting thought. So thank you to the chiefs and all the people that worked on this committee.
Alex Samaco, Barrington Select Board.
Terrific, thank you. And we have staff from both Lee and Madbury here. We also have representatives from Frisbee Memorial Hospital and McGregor Memorial EMS and UNH Dispatch. And it's worth mentioning that the stakeholders outside of these three communities have been an integral part of the process. They've attended meetings, they've provided input. And so we're not just operating in a bubble or on an island. This work, the minutes were shared far and wide, and we brought stakeholders into meetings, and glad to see them here tonight. Moving forward, so as I said, we're going to walk through the strategic plan. So you can follow along in the presentation or in the strategic plan, but this document really captures the work of this working group. And so the working group has approved this strategic plan. We're going to be asking the board collectively to consider approving a version of this strategic plan to guide any future work. So the beginning of the strategic plan will be the part we'll kind of fly through. We are all familiar with the charge. We got together, this has been approved by the three communities. I'll point out that the charge in the process of the working group is really summarized on the inside of this trifold. And so the challenges facing the fire service, the process, what do we need to pay attention to? And then at the bottom, that collaboration continuum, which is where are we now? What can we do? When you hear Chief Nemeth talk about the short-term goals, the operational things, you'll see the progress that has already been made in those areas. And then in the potential, those long-term goals and, all the way to a fire district, a regional fire district, what is possible? Where could we go here? And so to the chiefs, are there any challenges that we didn't hit on in the introduction roundabout that you want to get out on the table now? Terrific. Any, in terms of the process, we'll see the short-term goals, we'll see the data analysis, and we'll hear about that. Questions from select board members? I guess I should have mentioned this earlier. We're gonna have a dedicated time for select board discussion and really dive into it. But by all means, raise your hand if you want to pause on a slide, ask something of your chief or the community member from your community. Hey, what does this mean to you, or how does this affect our community? Do that. So before I move on, any questions about the charge or the process up to this point before we get into the meat and potatoes? Terrific. So we'll start with short-term goals, and I think I will hand it off to Chief Nemeth to kind of walk through this process, and I'll run the presentation, and we can take questions as it comes.
From the June 16th meeting, it came to our attention that we don't know everything about each department. So we wanted to do data collection and analysis as a group. We wanted to look at different short-term goals, such as combining our SOGs, the run cards, and our joint training. Currently, we're working with UNH Dispatch, and all the three chiefs are looking at standardizing, can't say that word, looking at the format of our run cards and combining them so that it makes it easier for dispatch when they pull one of those run cards. It's the same format for all three communities. Joint training.
Chief, stop using acronyms. Some people don't know some of those things. What's a run card? What's an S?
SOG.
Yes.
So the run cards are our mutual aid agreements that we have with all the communities. So if we have a structure fire, last night Barrington had one, they went to a third alarm fire. Dispatch can pull that run card, that piece of paper, and look and say, okay, it's a first alarm fire, Lee, Madbury, Barrington, Durham Fire, Rochester, we're gonna call all of them to help them out on the scene. So the formats that we have as communities are all completely different. We've tried to get them similar to make it easier for dispatch, so that's why we pulled them into some of these meetings, sat down with them, and we're gonna come up with a new format that works best for them. You know, calling the fire departments, I just asked dispatch to do it. I don't, you know, they do a great job, but to make it easier for them, we'll make it easier for us. The joint training, we've talked a lot about that. We've looked at, we use a EMS program called Prodigy. We've looked at doing that together to see if it could be cost savings. A lot of this, we're trying to do some cost savings. With the Prodigy, we can actually set it up so that we can do a training. Somebody in Lee can put together a program, but Barrington and Madbury can review that and do the same thing. We have all the same protocols. We have similar equipment, so we can work together in those avenues behind the scenes with programs that we can develop. The other thing with the joint training is getting more members to train together. Currently, if you look as we go forward at the data collection, you can see the makeup of each department. Some of the departments have bigger on-call staffing, others have small. But there's no training for, like in our department, our on-call members, if they come in, they can do training, but we don't have a Thursday night training like we used to in the past. We've transitioned to part-time and full-time. So our on-call members in Lee can actually go to Madbury or Barrington and train with them. The SOGs that we're talking about, standardized operating guidelines, we give those out to all of our employees, and it kind of, it's like a step-by-step on how we handle car accidents, structure fires, that type of thing. So if we can standardize those, the three communities, if our firefighters from Lee go to Barrington, we know how we're gonna operate, we know, you know, what's expected of us. Click to the next. So the short-term goals, we wanted to pull together all of our data collection and review it together as a group. So we looked at demographics, financial, call volume, staffing and certification, apparatus and equipment, and we are looking at doing response time mapping. So this is some of the data that we pulled up together. We have a shared file that the group is reviewing all the time. We made a workbook Excel file that has all this data in it. So it just gives us a better, gives us all the information that we're looking for each community. And we are very different communities. Barrington's population is almost double Lee and a lot more than Madbury. The square mileage of Barrington is a lot bigger. But then if you look at population density, Lee has 225 people per square mile, whereas Barrington has 198, Madbury 155. So every community is completely different. It just brings the data to the focal point so we can actually review this and look at what we're dealing with. You have a slide in there for financial. We looked at the municipal budgeting, the fire department, and then a portion of each community's for the fire budget. And then the call volume. We looked at the total call volume for each department. Barrington has over 1,200 calls a year. Lee has about 700, and Madbury has 280 a year. They definitely fluctuate. In Barrington, they have their own ambulance, so they're responding to all their EMS calls. We contract with McGregor, but we still are first responders and go to all of the medical calls in town as well.
It's worth pointing out, even with the differences, the data that we collected, if you look at the call volume per person, in terms of what it takes, the scale of the communities in response, very, very similar. And so operationally, as we're looking at the size of the departments and what the expectations are on the level of service that our residents need, as defined by the calls for service, there are similarities as well.
We brought together our staffing. So we have charts with how the makeup of each department is. Madbury is strictly on-call. In Lee, we have 5 full-timers, we have 15 part-timers, and we have 3 on-call. Barrington kind of has it all with their employees. They have 4 full-timers, 8 part-timers, 11 per diem, and 11 on-call. Then we looked at the staff certifications. We want to know what we have for memberships have for certifications. It's kind of all over the table. If you look at a Barrington or even Lee, when we talk about our on-call members, some of our on-call members are just firefighters, some of our on-call members are just EMTs. Nowadays, if we're hiring part-timers or full-timers, they're gonna be at least firefighter EMTs. So this does make up the department. It's definitely different for each department and what they are. So this is a big one that I'm actually very excited about. We've worked with CAI to develop response maps. This is something that myself and John and Tom have talked about a lot extensively, that although if we don't want to go down the road of becoming a fire district, I think a fast way to make us all safer is to work together with automatic mutual aid. So when I say that, we talked about the run cards earlier, that dispatch is gonna call the departments that we're looking for. If we set up a run card with dispatch and there's a major car accident on 125 in Barrington, dispatch will know to start Lee Fire right off the bat. So when they tone Barrington for that same car accident, they're toning Lee at the same time. There's no delay in that. The company is gonna provide us with different maps that actually will tell us how long it would take Lee Fire to get to Barrington, or different aspects of Madbury. It would do the same with Madbury coming into Lee and going into Barrington. The way I kind of look at it is, we have a lot of major routes. 125 goes into Lee and Barrington, so that's definitely a corridor that I want to look at for high hazards. We have a lot of commercial structures in that area, so those are the areas that I want to look at with the automatic mutual aid. I think as chiefs, we don't want to tax our departments. We could go on every single call, but we want to evaluate this, look at the timing of how long it takes us to get to these certain areas, and then look at the high hazards things. Barrington Fire has turbo cam. We went there 2 weeks ago for a fire. So that's, a commercial structure that we'd be looking at. Lee has Market Basket. If we had a fire alarm activation there, maybe we're requesting Barrington at the same time. Madbury has Route 9 and 155 that we can work with them if they have bad car accidents or whatnot. So it's just more data that we want to bring to the table so we can make informed decisions on how we want to move forward with doing all this. And like Dale talked about with NFPA 1710 and 1720, those are the times that we're looking at in the NFPA codes.
Eric, as unfortunate as it is we have such a recent example, but could you talk to the group about the response map that you see? I think there's a perception that Barrington's bigger, we spend more money on fire service, we have, the staffing, we still have call numbers. This map illustrates challenges that we face, and using last night's example, can you talk about what this type of mapping and looking at responses means for Barrington?
Yeah, absolutely. Much like the other data that was on the previous slides, aside from all those numbers, just travel times, the map shows with our one station for 49 square miles, we have some long run times, and so there's the Route 4 corridor. Again, Chief Janelle's been working with McGregor and doing some automatic responses and working on how we can, blur those lines a little bit for some of those responses. And again, there's no, to reference the incident last night, where Connor's pointing on the map there, that's where the incident was last night. And there's no fast way to get there for us, there's no good way for us to get there. And as it was, Rochester was right behind Barrington. And that's not a political thing, and again, if the duty crew had been out on the call or whatever, Rochester would have got there first. And the reality is, when your house is on fire, nobody really, I might care what color the fire truck is, but in reality, you don't care what the name on the door of the truck is. And if we get realistic about it, the capital cost of having a fire department exist and all the overhead of the manpower, the people, the station, the training and everything else, but the actual per run, when somebody's house is on fire, you're gonna have to look long and hard for somebody from Madbury to go, yeah, I don't really want the Madbury fire truck going to Barrington. If somebody's house on fire, if there's a legit emergency, and again, the whole term mutual aid, it's mutual. Barrington's gonna come to Madbury when needed. And, just keeping those relations, in good health, and so that it is mutual and that nobody feels like they're getting abused, nobody's feeling like they're getting taken advantage of. And I'm kind of talking in circles. Does that answer the point that you were trying to make, Connor?
I think.
Connor, if you like, I can provide a little bit of light, because I was looking at these numbers today.
Please.
So the tone went out last night at 6:42. Again, it was up in that area that shows, I believe it's a 10 to 13 minute response time. Our engine 2 was on the road within a minute of the tone going out. It took us 9 minutes to get onto the scene, and then our Rochester came directly after, and then our tanker was on 17 minutes after the tone on scene. That just Barrington, that only brought 6 firefighters to the scene. So when we're talking about scene safety and going interior, we only had 6 firefighters. How many did you guys have with Rochester?
3, 5, 6.
6. So we had a total of 12. We couldn't have done that without mutual aid. Madbury was toned at the same exact time that Barrington was toned. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get a truck out the door, but I know that they had a crew there that could have came. They just couldn't get the truck to the door. So we would have gotten more there. And Lee just happened to be, they already know that we rely on them a lot, and they already started heading towards the scene. That's just how strong of a connection that we have, between the communities, which is great. So they were also pretty quick to respond.
Thank you, Chris.
But staying with this mapping, this is response time. So this means that firefighters are at the station, and this is just the drive time. Communities like Madbury, you have to wait for the member to leave their home, drive to the station, get their gear, grab their truck, and then drive. So if you're looking at like this area in Barrington that says 12 to 14 minutes, in Madbury, a community like that, you're waiting for the firefighter up to 10 minutes potentially just to drive to the station. So this is why we want to evaluate these numbers. I remember years and years ago, there was a fire in Barrington on Route 4, and Chief Walker looked at me and said he didn't care about the color of the fire truck. But also within our meetings, Mr. Bugby brought up that if he's having a medical issue, he doesn't care which ambulance shows up. He just wants the first one with paramedics. So that's why Barrington and McGregor have been talking and looking at this data to see, okay, maybe Barrington Fire can actually get to parts of Madbury faster than McGregor can, but McGregor can come into Barrington up Route 4 faster than they can. So we're just evaluating all the numbers the best we can.
And it's worth mentioning that this is just one of the scenarios that is being mapped for response time. So at their last 2 meetings ago, the working group authorized moving forward with the drive time mapping. Select boards authorized funding, thank you, that released the project. And so they made a quick turnaround for this first map. But for instance, looking at a town of Madbury, understanding that it's response time to the station and then drive time from the station, one of the scenarios looks at what the response time is in the town of Madbury just from the Lee and Barrington station. So to understand that if the Barrington station and Lee station are staffed, how soon can they get to all of the geography in Madbury, understanding that that might be faster than a Madbury firefighter responding to the station and then responding within Madbury. And similarly in Barrington and Lee, and so that component, and it's also worth pointing out that McGregor and Frisbee on the EMS side, those numbers will be looked at. And so there's a lot of data in the drive time maps that is being aggregated right now, and we hope to be able to review and make informed decisions on that. I want to pause here for a moment before we move on from data collection. It's a lot of data. This workbook that Chief Bennett mentioned, thousands of data points collected and a tremendous amount of work, crucial work. We can't make informed decisions if we don't understand what we're talking about and the similarities and differences of the department. So I know it was a lot of data. The information's all there. Are there any questions? Does everybody feel comfortable with the data portion of the work of the working group? Seeing head nods, terrific. Okay, so we'll move on from that if everybody's ready. We already talked about this, but
Yeah, I think we already talked about our standard operating guidelines. Working with Madbury and Barrington, they have some. Our standard operating guidelines have been updated recently, so I decided to share our resource with them. So if we're gonna work together, why not look at all the different options that we have? They're still working on updating their standard operating guidelines, but it's something that we wanna work together and have similar SOGs.
and as we look at long-term goals and things like staffing, the idea of being able to share staffing when they might show up at a station and the operating procedures and guidelines are identical from where they come from. And going back to the training, they're being trained on the same operating guidelines and procedures. They're being trained on the same equipment or the various equipment, and so that, you'll hear more about that when we get to long-term goals. Which is now.
So the group came up and we drafted long-term goals that we would like to look at as a working group. Obviously, this can change. They're not in any real order, other than the fact that we do kind of feel like goal 1 is something that we want to look at now and work our way to goal, I think, 11. And I guess at this point, the overall goal, if we could think, if we are gonna turn into a fire district, if that's what we wanna do in the future, is if you look at a city like Dover, they have 3 stations, but those 3 stations are Dover Fire and they work together. They have the same standard operating guidelines. They have the same equipment. The staff can bump around to station, That's kind of, could potentially be a long-term goal, but I think there's different options that we can work together, that we don't have to be a fire district. We can share resources, we can share personnel. I just think we have to figure out how to get there. So goal 1 is looking at the station districts. If we look at those maps, and I know we have town lines, but maybe we can actually reevaluate the stations and who goes where first. We just talked about it, Route 4 we can get to faster than Barrington, so maybe we just kind of redistrict that area. And you gotta really not look at the town lines anymore and just figure out what's best for the residents. Response areas, same thing with the response matrix. In Rochester, if they have a fire alarm activation in a certain part of their community, the central station might send an engine and the Gonic station might send a tanker. That's what we wanna look at. If we go to a fire up Route 4, maybe we bring our engine, Lee, because we can get there faster, but Barrington brings a tanker and Madbury brings a tanker. Goal 2 is staffing considerations. Is there an opportunity where our staff in Lee can cover shifts and work in Barrington as well in Madbury to help out? To do that, we have to get more data, look at what we're paying the firefighters, the benefits, human resources, a STEP program. Because if Lee's paying more than Barrington, we just talked about it, we're fighting all the time. They're not gonna go work in Barrington possibly for less money. Vice versa, if Barrington's paying more money. There's different avenues. Barrington has an ambulance, we do not. Maybe there's some firefighters that don't wanna work on an ambulance, but maybe there's some firefighter EMTs that do wanna work on an ambulance, so. Goal 3 is the staffing model. I wrote 24/7 coverage, I know we're all not there yet, but I think it's an opportunity that we need to look at. How do we wanna move forward with this group? Maybe we just continue with Lee and Barrington having 24/7 coverage, and Madbury's gonna take some time to get to that point. But we need to look at a staffing model for the future. Goal 4, we've combined all of our apparatus and equipment types into the workbook that we have, because maybe in the future, there's an opportunity that, like I said, Lee only has 1 engine, and we have a tanker in the rescue, but Barrington has a rescue and an engine. Maybe we can move some of these apparatus around and share the resources, so we're not buying $1 million truck constantly that we have to replace. Also, there's opportunities in funding. If we're a district or we're working together, we can get funding through FEMA a lot easier. And then we can potentially save money on maintenance when we move forward with working together to combine some of our resources. Goal 5, emergency medical coverage. I sat on the OR board for the fire chief in Barrington, something I didn't even really think of because it doesn't affect us. In Barrington, they work with Frisbee, they work with McGregor, and they have their own ambulance. We contract McGregor. I think it's something we definitely need to talk about. The fire side to me, because I'm a fire chief, is easy. Working with McGregor and Frisbee in Barrington, we have to sit down and talk about the medical coverage and how we're gonna move forward with that.
Let's pause there for a moment. In the strategic plan, this is obviously just a summary, but in the strategic plan, there's a description of these goals and a more elaboration on the objective. You heard from the chief what that objective is. First, from the working group, and Ms. Lunds, as well, anything you want to add to those 5 goals for consideration from the group? And from there, I'd like to have some discussion with the select boards, or among the select boards, about those goals, and from what you've heard so far, if you feel like those goals are appropriate for your community and something that should be in the strategic plan moving forward. So first with the working group, anything to add on this set of the first 5 goals, long-term goals? Please, Mr. Milano.
I just wanted more so to echo Chief Nemit's comments about not looking at this as a matter of Madbury possibly losing control or Barrington giving resources to the other towns. We're all one community, and it's been said multiple times tonight. If I have a medical emergency or if my house is on fire at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't care the color of the truck, the name on the truck. I just want somebody there within 4 to 6 minutes, you know? And I think that that really needs to be a focus for the community at large, because we're all in this together. We're all neighbors. Somebody mentioned earlier, there's a cul-de-sac that part of it is in one town and another part is in another town. Are we gonna fight over whose truck is connecting to which hydrant at the scene? Like, if my neighbor's house is on fire, I'm gonna help that neighbor. I don't care what town they belong to. So I urge not only the select boards here tonight, but the community at large to really think about this as, yes, we're helping the individual towns, but we're really helping each other. And that should be the focus. That should really be the goal, is that how can we best help each other to ensure that my house doesn't burn down in the middle of the night, that Rebecca's house doesn't burn down in the middle of the night.
On fire my house.
Yes. You know, or that, you know, a medical emergency in Madbury is attended to promptly. Or the same thing for Barrington, that a car accident on Route 4 in Barrington is attended to quickly, because lives depend on it. And that should be the concern.
Well said, thank you. Other members of the working group? Okay. To the select board members, this, and I know Chief Nevis said these aren't in order, but this is kind of, these would be the next steps. And so we'll talk more about next steps later, but what resonates with you about these set of long-term goals? And if we're going to continue working down this path and on a collaboration continuum, is this the direction that you feel is appropriate for your community? Please.
It seems to me, and I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head right now, it seems to me that when we each have separate programs and then we coordinate, there's a lot of different considerations on who pays what, how much money gets put in one place, who puts up the money. But if we had a fire district, that we would tax that fire district as a separate entity, and that each of us would pay, each of us would have a part of that. It would seem to me that that should be an early goal as opposed to working it up gradually. I'm just thinking that right now, so I'm ready for people to object.
In the, if I may comment on that, a lot of the stuff that the departments have been working on are stuff that is, you know, low impact, low cost, and quite frankly, should be done anyways. Everything kind of makes sense, it kind of jives. So the long-term goal of doing that, if that the direction of this committee is to continue in that direction, there's no harm done in having these things in place. If that doesn't work out, we haven't lost anything, we haven't cost the taxpayers a bunch of money, we haven't really lost anything by doing that. It's just formalizing some of those collaborations that have already been doing. So that's, I don't know how to word it properly, but the efforts that have been put forth are nutritional no matter what direction we go in my opinion.
Please. I think at least for me, the ultimate goal is, how is this gonna help the communities? And a few people have stolen my thing about, I don't care what color the fire truck is. But the ultimate thing is, this is gonna help the people that live in those 3 towns, even if we just do the short-term stuff. It's gonna help those people because response time is important. If it takes me 17 minutes to get service and I'm dead in 15 minutes, I don't really care because I'm dead. So, but the thing is, it's important because if I have to, like, one of the things we found out is in terms of Madbury, if they have to come to the fire station, get in their equipment, whatever, if somebody else can get there faster, that's a benefit to that particular person. The other thing in terms of the benefit for people who have housing insurance, building insurance, whatever it's called. Home insurance, that's it. If somebody can get to your house faster, that changes the response time, that changes the experience factor. It's called something, Chief Nemeth will tell me what it is. So if that number changes and somebody can get there faster, you get a cheaper price in turning your insurance. So there's a benefit to the homeowner for that particular purpose. But ultimately, I think it's a better service to the people that live in those communities. I would hate to have somebody say, oh, geez, grandma died because they didn't get there soon enough. That's not acceptable.
Please. Just to speak to, Dan, one of the things to speak into as far as making a fire district one of the first priorities, one of the things to consider is this is, as you can see, the amount of work that they've all put into this. If we were to get to the point that this has become a fire district, there is a tremendous amount of work that's going to go in here, not to mention just the legal aspect and the political. It's not only do we have to convince the people in this room, but the public itself. And to go right for a fire district at the beginning, we didn't want to lose momentum with this. So we're kind of working on the short-term goals and it's a building blocks. But even if we were all on board tonight, you're still looking at a couple of years before you would even consider getting to that point, just from the legal aspect, and the research is gonna have to be done. So that's why you don't see that as a immediate goal. We're gonna work on the short-term goals, show that we can make this, that they can be successful and build from there. So that's why it's not an immediate type goal.
Strader, please.
Yeah, kind of on the same bandwagon. I think you can't go to a district until you know what you want the district to be. Otherwise, you turn it all over to something to create whatever it wants. And if it's a district that's a separate political entity, I think that would be irresponsible for us to do until we actually know what we're doing. Well, because they has taxing authority. And there are things short of a district beyond what the work you guys are doing right now, too. Formal memorandums of agreement, sharing employees. There's a model of, this isn't literally what it'd be. You could say one town contracts the other town for the employees. So there are models that get you there. But I think this work is essential to any of those first, even if we do go district all the way. The other thing I was just going to say, goal 2 and 3, intertwined. I mean, they really are, because until you know how big your organization's going to be, it's hard to know how much you can afford. And it's good to separate them out, for planning purposes, but they've got to be, I think they have to be done in parallel because they just can't stand alone, kind of thing. And just a question, how many people do we need for all 3 stations 24/7, 365? In the past, I've done scheduling for 24/7, 365, and you need a lot more than people would think. I think that'd be good to publicly let folks know.
That's an excellent point.
Please. Just a comment. One of the things I found interesting, and it's obvious after you look at it, but we're not alone in this kind of thinking. There are many communities in many states that have gone through this as they look at the growth of their community. I'm holding one in my hand from somewhere in Rockingham Fire in Vermont, I think. And so there's a whole series of information in there about their process, their history, whether they went with a fire district and went to the state to get approval with an RSA or not. So I think in that sense, exactly. So there are models out there for us to look at as we go through that would be informative. I think it would be a good thing to do.
Mr. Avery, I think you brought up a couple of excellent illustrative examples of what this would mean, right? So if we're considering adopting a strategic plan and working on these long-term goals, what could that practically mean? What is a situation that could come up? And I think there are two maybe topical examples, which easy for me to sit here and talk about a topical example in Lee and in Madbury. But in Lee, a topical example would be equipment, right? So relative to goal number 4, the next time that Lee or Madbury or Barrington needs to face the replacement needs of an apparatus or the repair needs of an apparatus, this goal could help us advise maybe Barrington, Lee, and Madbury collectively don't need 6 fire engines. Maybe we don't need 6 fire engines, and maybe the next time somebody needs to replace a fire engine, it would be better to buy or to look into purchasing a specialized piece of equipment that could respond automatic to all of the communities, or blurring the lines of what our apparatus looks like and what those replacement schedules look like. So just in terms of thinking about what could these goals mean, and if we're traveling along the continuum but not a fire district, those are real conversations that we could have and collectively decide. Madbury, as Madbury looks to work from an all-volunteer model to a staffing model, you mentioned contracting services. It might not be a matter of hiring 4 full-time positions to have 24/7 coverage in Madbury, but it could be a matter of working with Lee and or Barrington to say, how could we get somebody stationed in the Madbury station on this priority schedule? We know what our calls are. So those are very real conversations that work on these long-term goals could advise. And just in terms of managing expectations of if we're asking the select boards to start to allow work on these long-term goals from the chiefs, those are the types of conversations will come up. And so how does that feel for, as select board members, if the next steps end up being, hey, we're maybe gonna consider having 1 fire engine in our community and allocating these dollars elsewhere, or we're going to consider contracting a service to another community for staffing. How does that feel? Please.
I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we don't have any choice. We have to work collaboratively. We're a community at this point. As a select person, I don't know, for many years, I've been watching how the fire department works, and it's been a struggle, watching Chief Nemeth trying to get people in, and then people leave continuously. It's a battle zone trying to get a 24/7, so I don't think there's any choice. So I wanted to bring up another piece of this thing. Don had mentioned that there's other areas that have done this already at this point. So what's the discussion with Nottingham, since a big chunk of my property is in Nottingham, my driveway's in Nottingham. Does Nottingham come, or does Lee come?
It's an excellent question, please.
So I think from the data that we've found and we've seen, Barrington's a huge community. So we are gonna work together, hopefully, on the automatic mutual aid. But at the same point, it's not gonna stop us from calling other departments.
Yeah.
So there are areas in Nottingham that we go to automatic right now, and they do the same for us. So that wouldn't change. It's just where the 3 communities gotta work together a little bit more. So Barrington, where they had their fire last night, is more closer to Rochester and Stratford. Barrington's still gonna call those communities first.
And I think as it relates to the increased collaboration, one of the things that was a topic of conversation early on is what's the right size to start thinking about this? And Chief Walker, for his purpose, he was a huge proponent. This is the retired chief in Barrington. He was a huge proponent for this push towards regionalization, trying to find a solution. And if you ask him, the right size for a fire district is like the size of a county. And I don't say that to say, hey, let's ring up the county commissioners and ask them to solve this problem for us. But I think how that conversation evolved was it has to start somewhere. And if it starts somewhere and it makes sense and it works, then that's something that's a model that can be expanded. I think the one common thread that brought these 3 communities together was this idea of current and near future needs for leadership. And that seemed to create an opportunity where all the players were willing to check their egos at the door and just consider what does this look like. But I think throughout the process, the conversation has been, if this is something that works, then it's expandable. And especially for a community like Barrington, there are a lot, every corner of Barrington is areas that we can't get to fast. We have Stratford and Northwood and Nottingham that can get down here faster than we can. Rochester, where's Stratford's second station? Can Stratford get here quicker than us?
From their Crown Point station, yes.
From their Crown Point
Call
station.
is,
Right, so, even at a call station, Stratford could get to this part of Barrington faster than we could. And so, I think the hope is currently, certainly maintain all of those mutual aid agreements that exist and leverage those and take what we learn to enhance those. And Lee is an excellent example with, it's Epping, right? The situation with Epping. I mean, there are addresses that are already automatic mutual aid. And hope that will expand if it makes sense. If it works, if it makes sense, take these lessons learned and share them. Anything else before we move on to the second half of the long-term goals? Okay, terrific. Give us a contact right there. Okay, you got it.
We're just continuing this, and I think we've just discussed it. To get our operating budget, we need to know what we're looking for between all of our departments. So goal 6 would be a leadership model. Do we look at having one chief of all 3 departments, which we don't need a fire district to do that? Do we look at having assistant chiefs in every community that are there more 24/7, and they're in charge of their town that they're working in? Battalion chiefs is something that the fire service uses, larger departments do. So a battalion chief would be on a shift 24/7. So they'd be in charge of all 3 stations when the chief or the assistant chiefs aren't there. Do we want captains? Currently, the town of Lee doesn't have any captains. We have lieutenants that run our shifts. But just there's all these different aspects of the leadership model that we need to look at. And something that we hit on earlier is our assistant chief does our fire prevention for us, for our community. That's something that you could use and have a fire prevention officer and maybe have one fire inspector to hit the 3 communities, so all the commercial buildings are getting the proper inspections that they need. I think determining goals 1 through 6, then we can look at an operating budget and potentially what we need to pay for all of this. I know there's different allocation models out there. My biggest thing that I keep saying is that throughout this whole process, we want to make sure that all communities are heard and everybody has an equal say. And I think there's some districts around here that people don't feel happy about on how things get voted on. And that's my biggest concern. I would like Barrington to have the same say as Madbury and the same as Lee. So it'd be 33 1/3. I don't know how we figure that out, but that's something that we need to look at. Do we look at the population, which that I don't think would work for having fair say for everybody. Property value, the call volume, there's all these different models that we can look at to make sure that it's fair for all the communities. And I think that's our biggest goal moving forward if we were to look at an operating budget. Goal 8, potentially regionalization. Goal 9, I don't think we have to be a regional fire department, but we can do regional training. We've already talked about that. Madbury and Barrington are going to be doing training this Thursday together.
It was last Thursday. That was my bad. Yeah, I got my wires crossed. It happened. It was successful. It was very successful.
I was going to show up this Thursday.
Yeah. We were wondering where you were.
Red trucks only?
Red trucks.
We don't want to go. Goal 10, potential regional fire prevention, we just talked about that. And then goal 11, I think we have to look at a capital improvements plan if we all work on this together, and how we replace some of our equipment moving forward.
Members of the working group add anything to those second set of goals? Obviously, the biggest there is regionalization, but in terms of continuing this process.
Maybe the chief talked about this. One of the things that was a realization for me is like, we have a thing called the financial planning tool. It's not like the CIP, but we were planning on spending about $1.2 million to replace one of our engines. And with the whole situation with, 4 companies out there, it would probably be about 4 to 5 years, something like that, to get a new truck. So our chief did some It wasn't sneaky, but it was very, very good in terms of finding one that was a demo truck. But can all these communities afford to spend $1.2 million, and it's gonna only escalate? That's a lot for some other communities. So if we can share those particular resources, if it's a rescue truck or whatever it happens to be, it's better if we can pool our resources together. But 1.2, I was like, oh my goodness, 1.2. I specifically asked the chief, can you get one that's not so shiny, that's maybe cheaper? He kind of gave me this weird look, so I don't think that's possible. But yeah, that's important, because these things are not getting cheaper, they're getting way more expensive. And we're all doing the same thing, we're all buying these particular pieces of equipment. If we can share them, that would be great.
Select boards, this set of goals, and as we continue, how do you feel about these goals?
I feel like the group's knocked it out.
I know Mr. Burke has something?
Yeah.
Yeah, just real quickly, speaking of goals, I just want to highlight something that was maybe glossed over, and that was back to the short-term goals. Page 14 to 16 in the package here, the strategic plan. You'll notice that most of those goals are actually marked as complete. And what I wanted to speak to was the pace of this group has been remarkable. And it's totally because of the chiefs working together and working very quickly on this. But from Madbury's perspective, we're in this discussion with you, and we're very interested on the progression of it. But we also need, hopefully, everyone to sort of acknowledge and respect where we are as a small little community. You see the demographics. You see that we're just all on call. We don't have any full-time employees in Madbury, never mind firefighters. We have a lot of challenges that are coming at us hard and strong, including fire, that we're trying to tackle carefully. But we recognize we also have to make decisions quickly. But one of the things I learned by being in this group was learning from the history of Lee and Barrington, of where you progressed and where you are now. And that's really helpful, but it's also kind of scary a little bit, because we're still right here. And for example, Chief, you said first full-time was 2004, right? So you've had that model for a long time, where we don't even have that yet. So I hope you can understand where Madbury is coming from, that we're really trying to grapple all this very quickly in a short amount of time. So I would like the work to continue, because that's one of the things that is going to be asked of the select boards tonight, is to authorize this group to continue its work. But some of these short-term goals, although they're marked as complete, we want to see some time to make sure that they're working, and that they're sort of, the proof is in the pudding kind of thing. And it speaks to the continuum that we outlined. And I know everyone's sick in the group of me saying it, but I really want to see the continuum progress, not just a goal of fire district being put in front of others. Because I think it's important to explore the options progressively, because we might get close, but we might not have to actually go there. And that might alleviate a lot of concerns in the room about a taxing body, all the other RSA statutory requirements of that move. But if we keep progressing in that direction, that would be, I think, very smart. But the other thing that this group is going to be asking the select boards, and is asking, is for some direct input on these long-term goals. What do we want? How, what are these things that we're thinking of? Are there things not in this packet that you're thinking of tonight that should be included? But I think Connor described it as political decisions. Whatever name you put on it, it is stuff that the fire chiefs can't decide on their own. It is going to be up to the three boards to work on and discuss and decide and help move forward.
Others, please.
Yeah, so I had a
I apologize.
Sorry, I had a chance to sit down with retired Chief Walker before he retired and get his opinions on this, and I'm all for it. I think we need to keep going and continue exploring. I agree that we are in different places, and I think anything that hits goal 8, some sort of regionalization, is going to require some adjustment within each of the departments and maybe some further individualized development in order to get there. So I think that this should continue. I can't think of anything that isn't addressed here in the long-term goals, but I would really like to see this move forward because I look at the map, I see that my house is yellow. I would certainly love to see that be green. I don't really care where it comes from or what color it is. So I would love to see this continue.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all want this to continue, and it's I think it's the way forward for us, because doing it independently doesn't work clearly in Madbury, but I don't think anywhere. And in terms of the goals themselves, I think we need the input from the professionals. For example, group goal 6, we need to see, what do you think is an appropriate leadership model, and if there's several, maybe bring that back, but you're the experts. And the only other thing I was going to say is somewhere in here, I think we maybe all use the same legal counsel, but I just want to have some input into what legal issues any of this might entail that we need to address.
So I'll bring us to the next slide just to keep this going. We'll have an opportunity for public comment, which I think is important, and then we're moving on to next steps and really talking about finalizing these goals, and then specifically a timeline, which we haven't talked a lot about. But before we have public comment, which Chair Bugby will manage, is there any other questions that the select boards have or discussions the select boards want to facilitate?
I have a quick question that came to mind as we were going over the demographics that we didn't really discuss into groups that maybe I sort of missed, and that's the per diem. I just noticed Barrington has a big chunk of per diem, but you're the only one that has per diem. Could you just explain real quick how that actually works? How it benefits, or is it a benefit? And
I would make up a bunch of words and we'll have Connor answer that. Because it is semantics and to a point. It's not operational, so Connor's a better answer to that as far as the legalities and.
Peek behind the curtain. Chief Walker created a system in the department that the officers inherited. I thought I understood it. The officers knew they didn't understand it. We got together and realized, no, none of us understood it. So it's a distinction without a difference. I mean, they're essentially part-time employees, but they don't have regularly scheduled shifts. So we have a variety of pots of money in Barrington, certainly the operating budget, but also with ambulance service, we have an ambulance revolving fund, which funds shift coverage. So we have funding available for shift coverage 24/7, 365, plus or minus. Now we need more bodies to cover those shifts. So we have 4 full-time positions, and that's terrific. Our part-time positions are positions that work a regular shift, typically 1 24-hour shift a week. And that classification for Barrington's personnel policies makes them eligible for things like earned time accrual and short-term disability benefits. And then our per diem employees, that's our roster of their, maybe they came up through Barrington for training and they work full-time in the city of Dover, and we put out that we need this shift covered, they're available, they come in and fill the shift, but it's not a regular schedule that they work, it's not a regular shift, they're on our roster. There's also, our per diem members are also like our call members. So, the 6 folks that responded from Barrington to the Longshore Drive structure fire last night, 4 of them were probably per diem. Maybe a couple of them were the part-times that responded like as a call member. But so it's kind of a distinction for our purposes in how we classify employees in our personnel plan. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. Thank you.
Pretty much what I was going to say. You did good, Connor. You did well, so.
It's a challenge. But the warm bodies, that's the important part, right? We just figure out how to pay them and schedule them later. Okay, I think, Mr. Chair, we might be ready for public comment.
All right, anybody has anything they want to say, any questions they want to ask? Oh, it's a lively crowd. Nothing? Your presentation was so good, they have no questions whatsoever.
Terrific. Last slide, next steps. So the ask as we went over in the beginning, this is a strategic plan that was approved by the working group to bring forward to this group. We are asking the select boards to consider approving the strategic plan to set a guide for the process moving forward. Obviously, the biggest part of the strategic plan, which hasn't already been done or isn't already happening, are the long-term goals, which obviously we just spent a good deal of time on. And something we haven't talked about, which doesn't have to be defined perfectly right now, but some sort of timeline for those long-term goals or next steps. If a joint meeting is the venue that this group wants to hear these updates, or if we want to issue reports and review those at our regular select board meetings. And then last item there is a directive from the group to have the working group continue on this. So pick your pleasure which topic you want to address first, but how do the three select boards feel about those next steps?
Aye.
Fine. Well, then let's talk about timeline. So, oh, sorry, please, Mr. Rancho.
I was gonna say, I think, the easy one is, do we want the working group to continue? I would suspect that there's a lot of nodding heads around, but I don't know that we need a big vote. And there's no volunteering from the working group, so look on you. We're gonna beat you up. I think we can eliminate that as something to discuss. And I think probably the strategic plan, adopting a strategic plan, then sets how we set up the timeline. I think that's the sequence I would order this in.
Expectations for timeline. I mean, it's enough to say as it comes, right? As the chiefs have capacity to spend the time on this and the working group can process it and package it up into something. But in terms of, especially those, first 6 goals of starting to look at those items, I mean, these are conversations which will come before the boards for talking points as issues in these categories come up. And so is this something that in the next 12 months, the expectation of the boards is that we find a way to address or really dive into these 6 goals specifically, and then the 12 months after that is an evaluation of the next, say, 5 goals, where it's a little more open-ended on how long it might take to implement those later goals, if it still makes sense, right? They're constant check-ins through the process. But what are the expectations of the board members? Mr. Avery-Jackson?
As far as chunking them together, I think number 6 needs to be up with staffing model.
Right.
Not down a whole other block, yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. This was just the how they broke on the slides, but I think 1 to 6 seems to be that break. I'm seeing head nods. 1 to 6 seems to be that break of the first set of goals, maybe not in any particular order. Mr. LaCourse, did you have something? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I think we're moving in the right direction. It's hard for me to work on a timeline because I'm not the person doing the work. It's easy to just lay it out and say, I'd like to see something done within 3 months, but I know that's not going to happen.
Right.
I don't think you have to go by goal 1, 2, 3. I don't, they could stop wherever they wanted at this point, obviously the working group. But obviously it must be that some aspects of this drives another aspect. So I guess I would lean on the chiefs at this point to give us a little bit of view of where they think is a starting point and what might follow afterwards. That'll give us a better idea about maybe we should have a quarterly meeting or something, and definitely an annual meeting, but maybe something semi-annual at this point where the groups can all get together, because I do feel the combination of all the boards and all the working people in this group is very important.
A logistical thing, Connor. I believe when the 3 boards authorized the working group, we authorized it through today, basically. So I would ask if the 3 boards are interested, I think they are, of reinitiating this particular group and give them a longer charge in terms of their time frame. So hopefully we can do that, because that's what is needed. Because the people that bring to the table, the people that are on the working group, are going to have to deal with all these. So if we can reinitiate the particular group, that would be helpful.
I agree. Relative to timeline, Chief Nemeth did put some draft dates in the initial document, and we felt as the working group that maybe it's better to bring that forward blank. But I think you make a very excellent point, which is the folks doing the work ought to have some say in what a reasonable timeline is. So,
I think in my opinion, and I'm not speaking for John or Tom who aren't here, but we had 7 meetings since June 16th. We got a lot of data and we collected a lot of material that we need to move forward. I think what I would like to see is us to continue working on the short-term goals for now. Maybe give us by the end of this year, and then maybe starting in January, we look at the long-term goals. We're not fully complete with the short-term goals. We need to do the response matrix, the mapping. I'd like to finish that first because I think some of that might also drive the long-term goals. So I would ask maybe January, February, we start with the long-term goals. In my personal opinion as well, the long-term goals, like I think Dale talked about it, this is gonna take 3 to 5 years. I mean, we can sit down and work on these goals, come up with a lot of good information, continue having these meetings, but to get to the end of this is gonna be 5 years from now.
I believe we only have a year and 6 months and 2 weeks. Is that right?
you just go look at the background of his phone, it'll tell you.
So maybe we should split at this point, have a vote to continue on all the short-term goals and then have a pause. And this group reports back at that end time, and we are here in mass. It might work that way.
Second.
I just don't want to handicap them and hold them. I don't want to hold them back from working on long-term goals I'm sorry. I would consider maybe allowing the long-term work if it presents itself the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely.
The way, I'm sorry, maybe I misheard you what you said, but the way I heard it was almost only the short-term goals.
No, not at this point, but I just want to give some kind of formal deadline with a report back to this group en masse
I see.
of all the short-term goals. Time permits, and obviously, as these short-term goals are being completed, they're going to move into the long-term goals. There's no question about it.
Thank you, thank you for that. While I have the mic, if I could just ask the other boards that are here a question that I think we're all facing right now, and that's our budget for next year. Right, we're all working on or struggling with our operational budget. In Madbury, we've already made a significant increase to our fire department's operational budget just to try to do something, working with Chief Purley on what we have. But of course, we're now looking towards next year, and what does that 1-year operational budget look like in light of the unknown, right? Because this work is being done, but we don't have any official agreement to do this stuff yet and everything. So I'm just curious what the other boards are doing related to their fire budgets, if you have any tips, guides, information to share with us, because I don't think I have anything more to share. I'm not keeping secrets, but that's kind of what we're looking at, is we're trying to responsibly increase the operational budget in Madbury so that we can start to build towards being able to do these things.
Well, and with apparatus and equipment, what to do with the CIP, and what do we actually need to budget for?
That too, right? Mapping out.
There is $1 million out there, you guys allude to, but how can we push it back farther?
So one of the things that we do in Barrington is a lot of long-term planning. We have multiple, capital reserve and revolving funds that we pay into, even though we don't necessarily know that in the next year we need to buy X, Y, and Z, but making sure that there's always funds in reserve and looking at the lifespan of the equipment that we have working now, and really leaning on, our chiefs to let us know what the more long-term goal looks like. So if we need to put something to the voters now so that we're not surprised in 5 years, has been a really important thing that I've learned. I mean, this is my first year on the select board, but I've learned that long-term planning has been really key in kind of keeping things as level as possible. There's always going to be spikes, but that is something that I think Barrington does a really good job at.
I guess as it relates to the operating budget, the town of Barrington is budgeting for status quo in 2026 for the fire department. Our chief prepared, as it relates to the capital reserve contributions and the equipment replacement schedules that Ms. Smock was talking about, having, this is what the status quo looks like, this is what continuing down this path looks like in terms of equipment replacement. And he also prepared, this is what it could look like, that is, this is a possible future. And so starting to talk about it in that way, but when it comes to appropriating real dollars for an operating budget and capital reserve contributions, maintaining the status quo, because I don't think Barrington knows enough about what 2026 could look like to confidently make one-year operating budget decisions or even capital reserve contribution decisions different based on this work.
Chief will have to correct me, but you're going through what we went through 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it's painful. I don't want to sugarcoat it for you, but it's painful. One, in terms of the chief had very significant issues in terms of finding people, and also from the expense side in terms of paying those people so that they don't drift off to other departments. And I don't behoove those people, they make decisions for themselves. We pay a respectable wage, but if they can go to Durham and get $20,000, $30,000 more per year, that's their choice. And I don't fault them for that at all, but that's what we were up against. And Chief's done an excellent job in terms of finding people that appreciate the department, appreciate the particular environment he's created. But that is a long-term thing. And it's, just for me, I'm on an in the department, and it was painful for me to go through it. So that's not the sky is falling, but it's not rosy. So that's my only advice to you, and it's something you just have to go through because you need that particular service. And the thing, we haven't talked about it because I know the fire department, the police department are not friends. That's what our chiefs tell us. But the same thing with you guys, with police. If I live in Madbury and it takes me X number of minutes to get response, sooner is better. So, but yeah. So you're probably not going to talk to me anymore. I don't like what I told you, but that's just my perspective.
And I'll say, and we've talked about this in the meetings, that 10 years ago, we were losing all of our part-timers and on-call members to these major departments. The atmosphere that we've created, that we've looked at the salary of the STEP program, and we've added separate bunk rooms for the firefighters here. We've now stolen 3 firefighters from big time departments. We have one from Salem, one from Concord, and one from Durham. Also, the period of time when we were losing all of our on-call and part-time members to the bigger departments, they're actually all back, and they're all of our part-timers now. So at one point in time, 5, 10 years ago, the senior member of our department with experience only had 1 to 2 years. Now we're looking at 15 to 20 years, because those part-timers are coming back. And we have firefighters that work in Manchester, Concord, Durham, Dover, Rochester. So it was extremely hard all those years, and I worked in many, many shifts to help get us through this. And the firefighters that we had on staff, they trusted me. I said, this is gonna be our goal, this is where I wanna see it. I want the 24/7 coverage. I talked to the board years ago about this. I'm gonna keep coming, bugging you every year for a full-timer. And we got to this point now where we're at, but it's been my whole career that we've gotten to this point, so it's definitely a struggle.
To bring us to a conclusion, I'm hearing that we ought to set a time frame for meeting again. It seems like these have been productive. Looking ahead to what schedules we're going through, maybe sometime after town meeting season is a reasonable time to try to set a date to get back together. I'm seeing some head nods. I think it sounds like there's motivation, although we'll summarize it into a motion to charge the working group with continuing to work on short-term goals and starting to approach long-term goals. I think what the chief mentioned on let's wrap up the short-term goal progress and then start focusing our energy on the long-term goals. So Lee has a fiscal year, July to June budget. Your town meeting is still in March.
Right.
Right. So everybody has town meeting in March, so, looking at sometime towards the end of April for a joint meeting? Does that feel appropriate in the annual cycle of things?
About 6 months.
Yeah, so it's about 6 months. Okay. So maybe we'd be looking for a motion to authorize the working group to continue extending the charge with the expectation of an update joint meeting sometime in April, where the group in the meantime will work on continuing short-term goals and starting to implement the long-term goals. And maybe as a separate motion, we'll consider adopting the strategic plan.
So moved.
Okay, so we'll start with the continuing the charge.
Each board has to do their own vote, right? You can't vote as.
Is this a posted meeting for all three boards or not?
It's supposed to be for all three boards. I think operationally, for the purpose of each board's minutes, recording a first and second from each board makes sense. It's pretty easy. So for the purposes of Madbury, who would make that motion?
Mark.
So moved.
Terrific. And seconded by?
Me.
Terrific. For the purposes of Lee, we heard it first.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Hawthorne. Purposes of Barrington, I have Mr. Mantrek, seconded by Mr. Sakosha. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Terrific. For the purposes of the strategic plan, so we haven't made any adjustments to the stated goals or objectives. The strategic plan as presented would be the proposal to adopt for the work that has been done and to be done. From Madbury, a motion? Adopt the strategic plan?
Hold on a second, we're chatting.
Oh, I apologize.
No, the group approved it and adopted it. The group approved this.
The work.
Now we're asking for the boards to actually adopt it. And just keep in mind that the long term specifically says draft, because it just still in draft form.
Dan, did you take that photo?
Yeah.
Did you see my reel today?
Adopt or accept, the.
We're just wondering if this is something, because we really haven't looked at this and talked about it as a group, if this should be the individual board votes at our own meetings.
Could be.
Yeah, because again, we really haven't talked about it within ourselves, so, the other boards, I assume, talked about this, or have you guys? Yeah, and it's a little bit different than doing with all three boards together, And this is one you don't need to know right this moment to press, you got the timeline, so. Just sorry to stick my neck out there, I like that.
No, and I think that the purpose of getting together is just what you mentioned, let's find the process and make sure that we review things appropriately. I think the value of each board spending time on the strategic plan separately could certainly be more of a deep dive into those long-term goals, the descriptions and objectives, and any feedback among them. And so maybe the charge to the three boards is at upcoming meetings and maybe before the end of the year, because that seems like the timeline before we transition to long-term goals, is to set aside some time to look at the strategic plan and specifically the long-term goals and provide any feedback, and the working group can aggregate that feedback and put something back out for approval. Seems like a reasonable approach.
Reasonable.
Terrific. Any other business that we need to attend to as a collective?
Can we authorize the working group to continue? Because we haven't done that.
I think we did that in the first one.
Yes.
I think it was a bundle.
Combined motion.
Yeah, that was an omnibus.
All right.
Pretty good.
Good word.
Threw me under the omnibus.
Yeah.
That's good.
He does need to teach us.
Okay. Anything else from the working group?
Now that they've approved that, can we have a working date for our next meeting?
We should talk about that. I think we can talk about that offline.
2 weeks from now.
I think part of the next phase of the working group probably doesn't require bi-weekly meetings. I think there's a lot of work that the chiefs need to do and that need to be done by staff and with check-ins with the working group to kind of keep things going. So I think we need to think, rethink the schedule and the meeting schedule. So probably a debrief meeting from this, which we could certainly stick around to find a time for that. And then establish a schedule moving forward. Any closing comments, please?
Would it make sense, the boards are all gonna go back and discuss and approve or not, or give some feedback? I just wondered, do we wanna wait for that feedback before we schedule the first meeting, so that way the group knows what the feedback was as we start back up, if each board could provide that feedback, in a timely manner? Does that make sense?
That seems reasonable, so maybe a next working group meeting sometime in January?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely, because Madbury might have a different vision what Lee does. It's a good opportunity in Barrington as well.
Absolutely. Okay, any more closing comments? I'll circle around this way.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody's hard work.
Appreciate it.
Works much.
Very impressive group.
Perfect. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey.